Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and this is the new TinHifi T2 Mark II, which of course is the follow-up to the very popular original T2. And I am a big fan of the original T2, and I thought at the time it was a great IEM for the price. Of course, there have been multiple follow-up releases since the original, and not all of them have been as successful as the original. And now we have the T2 Mark II. So I guess the questions are, did they improve over the original, and also can it compete in the current budget market? As usual, we'll go over what's included in the box. We'll talk about the specifications and design. Then we'll do a fairly deep dive into the sound. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. In the box is the IEMs and cable. It also comes with a decent assortment of tips. However, they do not include a case. It's priced at $59, and it has a coaxial dual dynamic driver configuration. One of the drivers handles the bass and the other the mids and treble. The drivers are housed in an all alloy shell, so they're light, but they still feel fairly robust, and they seem to be well constructed for this price point. Fit and comfort are pretty good. I didn't have any issues with the discomfort, and I also had no issues getting a pretty nice fit and a solid seal with the included ear tips. That being said, isolation isn't that great. I did have a little bit of noise bleed, not a lot, but enough to notice when I was listening to some quiet music. Now, as for the design, it's simple, but it does stay true to the original, and they have updated it. So even though the main body does still have that barrel shape, they've added what I can only describe as kind of a wing, so it gives it a spiral type aesthetic. The construction of the cable is decent. It does feel just a little plasticky to the touch, which really isn't a big deal because the main thing at this price point is that it's constructed pretty well and it's durable and easy to manage, which it is. However, I do wish they would have used 2-pin connectors at the earpiece instead of the MMCX connectors. And then the cable is terminated in a 3.5. Okay, let's move on to the sound. I know I'm a little late to the game on this one because there are lots of reviews already out, and if you've watched any of them, you'll know there is kind of a general consensus that the set has some issues. It suffers from imbalance, and the treble might be described as being invasive, and I'll just tell you right now that I 100% agree. So let's talk about the overall sound presentation first, and then I'll break it down for you. So if I had to guess as to what type of presentation they were going for, it would be neutral or neutral bright. And technically I would say that it does fall within the neutral signature parameters, but it's light on the bass and definitely heavy on the treble. Now, I've talked about my tuning preference being neutral with a bass boost. And again, this is technically neutral, but because of how reduced the bass levels are and how bright the treble is, it falls quite far outside of my personal tuning preferences. Now, I will say that while I think what I'm hearing does align with the graph for the most part, it doesn't sound quite as imbalanced as it looks on paper, again, to my ears. So to break things down just a little further, starting with the bass levels could use more energy because kick drums, bass guitars, or any instruments that land within the low frequencies don't quite have the presence they need to balance out the upper mids and treble. And I also do wish there was a little more sub bass extension as well. Now, I am getting some dynamics, which is good, but it's very much on the polite side. And then as you move into the mid bass and lower mids, those frequencies sound a little thin. So male vocals, cellos, or any instruments that should have some note weight or that low mid or mid bass richness have a lighter and thinner presentation overall. Despite all of that, I will say it does still manage to reproduce instruments and female vocals relatively naturally. It's not the most natural set that I've heard, but it is natural enough as not to become a distraction. Mid-range detail is also pretty good for the price, and I think maybe I would attribute that mostly to the upper mid-range energy between around 3 and 5K, which is quite a lot. And this is where I started really picking up on some of that imbalance I talked about because of the sheer amount of upper mid-range energy compared to the lower mids, mid-bass, and bass. And this definitely does push vocals and some instruments quite forward in the mix. And here's the thing, that energy, that intense amount of energy carries through into the treble as well, which contributes further to its top-heavy presentation. And then one other observation I made was that there is some sibilants that can be a little distracting. And while I'm getting good levels of upper, mid, and treble detail, what I noticed is that the sibilance and peakiness was kind of getting in the way of me being able to enjoy those details. Treble extension is good though, so I could hear nice amounts of air, and I was also able to get nice amounts of shimmer, and that also helped to contribute to a more open presentation as well. Which brings us to its technical performance. Now again, it does have decent amounts of detail for this price point. The soundstage or the sound field is quite open sounding, and it also has fairly good forward depth as well, which is great. Instrument layering and imaging is also pretty good. So in terms of its general technical performance, for 60 bucks, I would say it's pretty good. I'm going to keep my summary brief and just say that while there might be those in the hobby that could find this tuning approach appealing, again, it does fall pretty far outside of my preferences. I do think its technical performance is good. I think the build, the design is also pretty good. I did like the original T2 at the time of its release, and I can kind of see why they approached this with a similar tuning, but I just wish they had added a little more bass energy and then tamed the upper mids and treble as to help give it more balanced overall presentation and some added treble control and just a little more refinement. So that concludes my review of the TinHifi T2 Mark II. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.